Welcome to Jeanne Mayo's 100X Leadership Podcast. You know what? If I were you, I'd be saying, what in the world is 100X about? It's really a mantra in my life, taken from Mark 4:8, where it says, some seed fell on the ground and it multiplied 30 times itself, sometimes 60 times, sometimes even 100 times. So man, my mission is to put some of you amazing leaders out there on my shoulders to multiply 100 times what I could ever do on my own. So, hey, fun having my partner in crime, Vance Smith, who is our pastor here at Victory over all the youth and young adults fusion, about 700 young adults every Tuesday night. So, Maestro, what are we talking about today?
Well, we took a poll on Instagram and Facebook, and we asked you guys what you wanted to hear from Jeanne. And we found a question that we thought would be relevant for everybody.
Okay, I can't wait to hear the question.
You've been doing ministry for a little while now.
A little while.
You've stuck in the game.
A little while.
Have you ever thought about quitting? Do you ever think about quitting?
Have I ever thought of quitting? How many times have I thought of quitting? That's almost the best line. I would simply say that if you have not been in ministry, whether it's youth and young adult or whether it's just any kind of ministry, if you haven't been in ministry long enough to want to quit, you have not been in it long enough to be any good at it.
Man,
the other day told a few people I was doing a Q&A with who are entering ministry. Michael Jordan got really tired of making free throws. And he says that greatness is in repetition of the non-exciting drills. Plus, my head's gotten kicked in a zillion times. So yes, have I said it loudly enough? And the only reason I haven't is I know that whatever I toy with in my mind will eventually make me its toy. So that's why I haven't quit, because I know I'd better own my thoughts pretty quick, or I would have quit a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, what do you think are some things that might take people out of the game? What are maybe some things that have come across your mind?
Okay, let's play a game. I don't want my voice to go too long.
Okay.
We'll go back and forth.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
What could take people out of the game? I think just emotional pain, whether it's people being critical of them or just the train wrecks of life that happen to all of us. It may have nothing to do with ministry, but gosh, it sure could.
Yeah.
For you. Or for anybody.
Yeah. I think on the other side of that is maybe not something super dramatic, but just boredom, the mundane.
Oh, absolutely.
And getting too redundant.
Absolutely. Yes. I just said to my leaders yesterday as I was trying to motivate them to get kids on our next retreat, I've done in my ministry over 200 retreats. Gosh. And I just think, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
But it's easy to get bored.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or number 3, what would take you out of the game? What would make you as non-gritty? Because that's what we're calling today grit, the power of perseverance and passion. I think financial strain takes a lot of people out, because you want to do this, but if you're bivocational, you've got to still be making a job, and there's not much time left over, and the pennies aren't coming together. And even if you do get paid, unless you're working in a very unusual situation, you're probably not being overpaid. That's a nice way of saying you probably aren't making bank.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Nice way of saying it. All right, what else? What takes you out of the game?
Man,
gritty-wise.
Overwhelming pressure. Maybe it's not boredom, but maybe just the constant pressure. If you're feeling the need to produce, it can, become overwhelming. And I think people at a certain point can just start backing away and just lay it down and say, all right, this is too much.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. Okay, I'll throw another one in. Then if you can think of another one, and the list is so long. But gosh, I think comparison can take you out of the game.
Yeah.
It's the old compare and compete, and you live in defeat.
Yeah.
Social media makes it almost impossible not to compare.
Yeah, very true.
I love Craig Rochelle. He's in my cell phone. I consider him a dear friend. But boy, I can't watch many of his posts because by the time I watch, between he and Christine Kane, and she's a daughter in the Lord, I think, I'm not doing anything. So I think comparison makes me very non-gritty.
Yeah. No, I hear that.
Can you think of one more? Though obviously there are much more.
I think kind of along that same line, that when you're looking at what other people are doing, it can make you feel ineffective. And so
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Or, maybe you already don't feel all that effective and then you feel underappreciated.
Yeah. Very true.
And so feeling like you're not doing a good job and then not hearing that you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
It does take you out of the game.
Gosh. Yeah. And if you have a senior leader that is quite consistently telling you how grateful he or she is for your work, don't move away, no matter how much money. Yeah. I mean, a leader, just because, gosh, that's rare. Okay, Let's have fun. Going back and forth on another aspect of this grit question. And by the way, let the world see, I wore my grit t-shirt today.
Nice.
From one of our Capitol High School retreats. I want to impress you very much. I'm not so sure that I would call the emerging generation of leaders. They have a million strengths, which I'm super aware of. But I'm not sure grit would be intuitively one of those strengths that really characterizes the emerging leadership generation. Let's go back and forth. What are some of the things that you think, or I think, make maybe the generations emerging around us not quite as gritty, maybe as the generation that I grew up in?
Well, I think that we are a culture of highlights, and we don't understand or appreciate process.
Oh.
And so when we start experiencing things that are actually part of the process of developing, and it doesn't look like what we're seeing everywhere else, which is highlights, looking like everybody's on highs all the time. Attendance is always, skyrocketing.
Always.
Your messages are always getting, shared on YouTube and everywhere else, and you're going viral if you're a good preacher.
Yeah. Yes, you certainly are.
All those things. I think, those are some of the things that, we're seeing that can easily make us ungritty just because we don't appreciate, I think, or value process.
Boy, I agree. And I think another thing that makes us ungritty is, many people come from splintered families.
Yeah.
We haven't seen grit modeled, is what I'm trying to say. Not in church world, like youth and young adult ministries, turn over leadership constantly. Yeah. We haven't seen it modeled a great deal. We just, our family hasn't given us a lot of grit. It's tough to be something you have not seen, even if you kind of got the message unconsciously.
Yeah.
Anything else? What makes us ungritty?
Man, I think sometimes just all the distractions.
I agree.
In life.
Yeah.
I think that we're just looking all around all the time. This thing's coming up, and just staying focused, I think is that's probably still part of process. But I agree. I think that we really struggle with focusing. And I think that's one of the main things that you need if you're going to stay in the game or stay gritty is to be focused. And I think that we struggle.
I'm so smiling over this because I'm thinking of all the young adult and youth leaders that I know that I kid with about their ADD. They may not even have ADD, but focus is really tough for them. And I think one other thing that makes it tough to be gritty is just the hurt and pain that life brings. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but gosh, when you get your head kicked in, and that's not always just something earth-shattering, like my husband's promotion 3 years ago to heaven earlier than I wanted. Sometimes for me, it's just mind games. that you've referenced said, gosh, I just keep getting my head kicked in. I keep hearing what I'm not doing well. And I'm my own worst enemy. And so, gosh, those are some of the reasons, though we can make a long list. Long list.
Well, I know that you study. I know that you read.
I do.
And, leaders are readers, right?
I've heard that once.
And I know that you've shared a lot about the book Grit by Angela Duckworth.
Amazing.
Could you share with us maybe some things that you have pulled from there?
Sure. If you have not read the secular book Grit, and again, Vance gave you the author, Angela Duckworth, gosh, there are not many books that I would acclaim much higher than this. She gives you a 2-page grit test that is amazing. And there are very few tests that on these personality deals that I score a perfect score. Matter of fact, that's probably, I don't even know what a perfect score is on most of them, but that one I scored a perfect score, but I wouldn't have when I was just starting in ministry. But I've had to see, because the fun part is grit is learned. It's not just everything inside. So let me unpack key highlights from her book. They used to think that at West Point that they could predict the cadets that were going to be the most successful when they hit the battlefield by what they called the whole candidate score. West Point has this opening 2-month orientation called the Beast, and it measures academics, it measures relationship, it measures leadership, it measures athleticism, just really everything put together, and sends them through a really difficult opening 2 months. A lot of people drop out of West Point at that. But they learned that whole candidate score was not the biggest predictor of who was going to be really successful in their future military career. That it was, and the term that we keep using now is grit, called endurance, called whatever else. Matter of fact, interestingly enough, in the data that Duckworth does, grit is 2 times the predictor of success over even ability, which, gosh, that's so intriguing to me, because our generation so celebrates ability all the time, and we all know that. But ability, it takes you away, and certainly you need it, but even grit ups the ability score. And she talks about in the book a society, and these are her exact words. She says, now 21st century America, we are distracted by talent. Isn't that profound?
It is.
And that's really true. And she says, again, the same thing that I just said, that many companies or fields of endeavor are just wazooed by the people who look talented at the first, and they are, but they don't take into consideration grit, and thus results are not long-term. And she says grit has 2 components. This is really important. She said high achievers, gritty people, have both passion and endurance, and that makes up grit. And she really stops to accent that passion is not so much an emotion if you're a high achiever, but it is commitment. And so really, she says grit's made up of commitment and endurance.
So good. So yeah, that is really, really good. Could you share with us how to develop grit? That's I think the $1 million question. You know, I think that we're probably all convinced. I think that we probably have experienced our own lack of grit.
I certainly have.
Yeah, and our lack of endurance. And, you know, we see it all throughout Scripture, how, you know, God is telling us to develop, you know, and allow him to develop perseverance and endurance in us. How does that happen?
Well, again, I'm going to take it from Duckworth's research because it's fun to look at it from that angle. And she says over and over, the grit is not so much a matter of nature as a matter of nurture. In other words, it's not just what you're born with, though certainly some of us have personalities that lean us better that way, but it's what we nurture in ourselves. And she says 4 things come up in the research that talk about how we grow grit. Number 1 is interest. She says that it's going to be tough to grow grit in a field, any field that you're not really interested in. And then number 2, she says, is practice. Doing it over and over, that non-boring thing that boring thing, not non-boring thing that we all kind of, we hate, we resent. And I wrote on my notes here, it's always a privilege, not a sacrifice, to pay the price for your dreams. And I think leadership for all of us begins the day we start to pay the price and really ends the day in practice that I cease to pay that price. And then third, Angela Duckworth says grit is grown by purpose. Gosh, just feeling like whatever you're interested in has purpose in it, So, I could be gritty about certain things in life, but I'm not going to be terribly gritty about it because, I could be gritty about learning a new hairstyle or something. But you know what? There's not a whole lot of purpose behind that. So though I spent a while fixing my hair this morning and I'm interested in it, I got to tell you, not much purpose. So it's not going to ultimately get much grit. And I love this quote: far more men fail from lack of purpose than lack of talent. And then last of all, and this is the big one, she says you grow grit from the 3 things: interest, practice, purpose. But she says this is the biggest one: hope. She says hope does, quote unquote, Angela Duckworth, hope does not define the last stage of grit. It defines every stage of grit. From the first stage to the last, hope is what keeps us going. And I love the scripture where it says hope deferred makes my heart not to be sick. And I love the Napoleon Bonaparte quote where he says, the greatest leaders in all of history are the dispensers of hope, the people who've inspired hope. So there it is. Interest. How do you grow grit? Practice, purpose, hope, cultivating those 4 things. And I remind myself, and it's fun to kind of end with this, little minds have wishes, but great minds have purposes. And somebody the other day paid me a compliment, said I reminded them of the quote by Katharine Graham, the amazing newspaper publicist, that said, and I love this, to remember what you do and to feel it truly matters. How could anything be more fun?
That's good.
So closing thoughts on grit, my friend, and then we'll sign off.
Well, I'm inspired. You've inspired hope in me.
Well,
I'll say.
Hey, what a deal.
Because I know, as a part of, this generation, and especially this generation of leaders, pastors, I know that is something that I'm wanting to continue to develop. And I think, what you're saying about purpose, interest, man, not just looking for money, not taking a job for money or being in a field or industry for money, but being interested, having purpose. I think that's going to just help so many of us. And so I'm excited about all of us who are going to hear this, to even be able to share with our peers, if we're maybe youth or young adult leaders, to be able to share with the next generation, because it's so important and so lacking in our generation.
And it sounds so easy to say, and he just hit a big one, but our generation really doesn't prioritize what gives you purpose, because finances and what egotistically looks to put you further up the ladder of success often wins. So let me end with the statement I use in our podcast. remember that as leaders, it's not what you do that will multiply, but it's who you are. And so, gosh, thanks for jumping in for our 100X Leadership Podcast. And may you put just a simple new focus on being a gritty person.